You're listening to the Adventure Sports Podcast. Thanks for adventuring with us as we discover what incredible athletes and outdoor enthusiasts are doing all over the world. Now here's your host, Kurt Linville.
Hey friends, welcome to the Adventure Sports Podcast. Today I have Robert Geier with us, and we're going to introduce an old, brand new sport. And Robert has been doing this sport for like 20 years, but it's a sport that people don't know about, and I love this. You know, a while back, I was talking to someone about all the new adventure sports that have developed since we started the Adventure Sports Podcast 10 years ago. And they probably had, you know, a grassroots movement before that, but a lot of them came into popularity while the podcast was going on. This is one of those that you may have never heard of. The name of the sport is Bungee Riverboarding, and it's not riverboarding as in going down whitewater on a board, or riverboarding like people surf a hole in a Class 4 drop or Class 3 drop. It's not that. This is something completely different that uses a bungee cord and a current to do some super cool stuff. I'm going to let the guests describe it. But Robert, welcome to the program. I'm so excited to hear about this sport because I've never seen it done before.
Thank you. I'm so grateful for you having me on the show.
It's just super, super cool. So Robert invented this, and he's been doing it since he was 10 years old. So this is something that he has a lot of history with. Matter of fact, he claims to be the historian of the sport, which makes sense because he's watched it from the beginning. And he was a computer programmer, but AI has struck, and so he transitioned to promoting this full-time now. Super cool. Robert, will you describe to us what bungee riverboarding is?
Sure. So bungee riverboarders ride small surfboards that are really more like a skimboard, if you know what a skimboard is. But anyway, it's a flat, small surfboard, which, like I said, is really like a skimboard. And we ride these on rivers, and we shoot upstream at 30 miles an hour on these little skimboards, which we call riverboards. And guys that are good, experienced at the sport, can do all kinds of skateboarding tricks once they're shooting upstream. So it's all powered by a bungee cord system. So what you need is you need a length of rope, you need a bungee cord, and at the end of the bungee cord, what we have is called a release system, which is a 6-foot long piece of rope that's encased in plastic. And then at the end of that piece of rope is a small metal loop. So you anchor the rope into a rock or a tree, anything solid along the side of the river. And then the other end of that rope is where you hook the bungee onto. And it's a 20-foot long bungee cord. And then at the end of that bungee is where this release system is with a loop on the end of it. And so you set that up in fast-moving river water. Then you jump in with your board, and you hook the board onto that metal loop. The boards have a hook built into the nose of it. So you hook that hook into the loop on the end of that bungee, and then you go out into the current of the river, and there's a special stance that you have to have, and you push that board down into the river. And when you push that board down into the river, then the river current hits it, and the river current pushes the board and the rider downstream, and it stretches that 20-foot bungee out to about 200 feet. And then when that thing's stretched fully out and you can't stretch any further, you basically change your position on the board, and the board pops up out of the water, and then you get in a surfer-style stance on the board, and then it bungee contracts, and it slingshots you upstream, and we hit speeds of about 30 miles an hour going upstream. And then when that bungee's no longer pulling, since the board was just hooked on there, the riders keep on going upstream, and that's when they can throw that board around with their feet and do all the skateboard tricks and spins and all the skateboard tricks. And then when your ride's done, you just grab your board, you float back downstream to where that release was in that little metal loop, and you hook it back on, push the board back down in the river, stretch back downstream, go up, then shoot upstream again, and you can go over and over again. The most rides I've ever done in a row is 32.
32.
But we have a ride-a-thon scheduled for this spring, too. I have a nonprofit where we take kids out on the river, and because kids love this. So I'm going to do a ride-a-thon this spring and see if I can break the world record, basically, for the number of rides in a row. So
that's awesome. It almost sounds like wakeboarding without a boat.
It is. It's like wake skating.
That's
it's a lot
so
like wake
cool.
skating, because wake skaters can do all those skateboard tricks too. But that's the thing. You don't need an expensive boat or gas to do this. It's earth powered. A lot of people have a hard time understanding that when they see the video, because we go quite a ways upstream for quite a while. And people just don't understand that it's Bungee and the river, and that's it.
Okay, I assume you're standing on the board when you're moving upstream, but how do you transition into standing? That's got to be hard.
Beginners and kids ride upstream on their stomachs. You can ride, when your back is fully stretched, you can just launch the board up out of we call it in the hole when you're stretching back. And you can launch up out of the hole just on your knees, or with kids, we do just on their stomachs. And it takes a while. Most experienced board sports people, like skimboarders and skateboarders, it takes them about 4 or 5 sessions out on the river before they can get the actual technique down to where they can stand and ride upstream like the guys you see in the videos, like in that surfer style stance.
Awesome. So, Robert, people that are like me that have not seen this before, are they're wanting a visual right now. Where could they go and look to see what you're talking about?
We have a website, evensurf.com, and we have pictures and videos there. We also have a YouTube channel, an Even Surf YouTube channel that has lots of videos too. Those are the 2 best places. We're also on Instagram and TikTok. We're on all the social media, trying to let people know about this.
So cool. So even has a special meaning that you told me before we hit record. What does even mean? Where did that come from?
Yeah, even is a bungee surfing slang. And even is the term for, like I said, one of the things you need to learn about this sport when you're a beginner is how to stretch the bungee cord out correctly. A lot of people don't have the correct technique. And so when you have the correct technique and you're stretching back, there's a point where you just can't stretch anymore. And in some of the videos, you'll see guys looking over to the side, and what they're looking for is the point we call even. So that's the point where when you stretch the bungee system back far enough to get a good ride, that's the point called even. And that's what the brand is named after.
That's fun. Okay, let's rewind a little bit. Now that people know what the sport is, at least a description of it, right? Where are you? Where do you do this?
I'm in a town called Boise, Idaho. And this is where I grew up doing this sport. And I've actually been doing this kind of for about 50 years. I started when I was 10 years old, but there's an old school version of this sport, and then there's a new school version of this sport. And the old school version of the sport, which I first saw when I was probably about 6 or 7. And it's where you take a piece of rope and you tie it to a bridge or a tree in the river. And at the other end of that rope is a piece of plywood. And again, you want the same kind of water that we look for. You want the fast-moving river water, but you want it to have a smooth surface. And we call this, another bungee surfing slang, we call it fast glass, is the kind of water that we look for. So with the old school style, you get that rope and that plywood, and you set it up in that fast glass water, and then you lean side to side, and as you lean side to side, the board goes back and forth across the river current. And that's the old school version that I started doing when I was 10 years old. But also when I was 10, the kids in my neighborhood would experiment with different stuff in the rope. We'd braid bicycle inner tube tires together and put it in the rope so that when you push the board down in the river, you get a little bit of a spring upstream on the river. And when I was a senior in high school, I found some silicone rubber tubing, and I put that in the rope, and we got a pretty good shot upstream. But son just ate that up, and that was the only time I ever did that until I was in my late 30s when a friend said, "Have you ever been boogie boarding before?" And I said, "Oh, I grew up doing that as a kid." And so the next time he went out, I went out with him. And I remembered that system that I had built when I was in high school. And I went on the internet and found, of course, a lot more modern materials, and started building systems much like we have today.
Nice. And this is Boise. So do you have favorite rivers you like to do it on?
I've got lots of favorite rivers. Some of my favorite, the Boise River, of course, where I grew up, is one of my favorite rivers. The Sandy River in Oregon is a great place. We've been to Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and done this. A place called the Snake River Narrows, a beautiful spot. Some of my great memories on some of the rivers. On the Sandy River, I was stretching the system out, because when you know how to stretch the system out, it's just a time for you to relax. You just sit on that board in the hole, and you're just checking out nature around you. And I was doing that on the Sandy River, and an osprey came down. I don't know where it came from, but it came out of the sky, hit the water, and when it lifted off, it had a snake in its talons.
Oh, wow.
And took off, yeah. And I had a similar incident on the Boise River also, in a town called Eagle here. and osprey came out of the sky and hit the water. And when it came out, it had a fish in its claws as I'm, just checking out the scene and watching nature.
You know what I love about any of these adventure sports is to get you out there where you can experience that kind of stuff. Yeah, I mean, you never would have seen it had you not been doing this bungee riverboarding. It doesn't matter what the sport is; those moments are so special.
Yeah. Another
Super
favorite
cool.
place of mine too is the American River in Sacramento. And one of the things that makes it so special is there's a lot of tuber traffic that comes down that river, and so people coming down the river, when they see us, and like I said, when we're in that thing that I called when we're in the hole,
Yeah.
when they're coming down the river at us, all they see is a head and shoulders sticking up out of the river.
Right.
So when you have the proper technique, the whole board and the bungee is buried underneath the water and they can't see it. So they see this head and shoulders, sticking up out of the river, and they're coming down at it. And we pop up out of the river and come screaming upstream, and then start doing those tricks, and they're just freaked out. In fact, sometimes they're so freaked out that they'll paddle over to where we're at to
Yeah.
try to figure out what we're doing. And one time on the American River in Sacramento, a guy paddled over, and he was, checking out the bungee, and he lifted it up out of the water, and he actually sniffed it.
Oh no!
So from that point on, because we don't really like it when people paddle over and get in our way, because we have
Right.
to just sit there and we can't launch. So from then on, whenever people do that, when they paddle over and get in our way, we call those people bungee sniffers. So there's some more riverboarding lingo for you.
Bungee sniffers. That's
Yeah.
hilarious. Well, people are curious, man. I would be curious. It's got to be a great way to meet folks, though, because they're gonna be saying, "What are you doing? How does this work?"
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Oftentimes, kids even get mad at us. A few times at a place called Parnell Beach, which is where a place we go a lot on the Payette River near Boise, Idaho. Kids will be there, come out just to swim, and they'll see us doing this, and they'll come up and they'll find out that we've been doing it for 20 years, and they'll actually get mad. They're like, "Why don't more people know about this? Why didn't I know about this longer? Why haven't I been doing this?" So it's a lot of fun.
It sounds like an amazing time, a real hoot. It just really sounds fun. Okay, so you said smooth glass or fast glass.
Fast glass, yeah.
Fast glass. So we're talking about when the river's moving with a smooth bottom and it has a solid current, but it's not whitewater. It's not all braided on top. So how much current do you need? How fast does it need to go?
You need to find a spot where you can walk out in the river, and if you can stand in the river without it pushing you off your feet, then that's not fast enough. So if you walk out in the river and you're standing there and it really kind of pushes you off your feet, then that's a good spot usually.
Okay, so I grew up in Tahlequah, Oklahoma, and the Illinois River is there, and it's a big canoeing river, and it's class 2. And there are places where the current's fast enough, just like you described. We would try to stand, and it's like it drags you across the river bottom. You can't actually stand against it. So you're saying that's the point at which the fun begins, right there.
Yeah. That's the kind of water you need to look for on rivers.
Okay, so it could be almost any river then. It's just finding the right spot on the river.
Yeah. There's usually on most rivers, there's more of the type of water we look for. There's more fast glass than there is rapids on most rivers.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the Illinois back in Tahlequah would be like that. There's a lot of places where the current's going pretty well, but, there's no whitewater. So how deep do you need?
You need at least 5 feet deep.
5 feet. You worry about banging your head when you come off the board?
No, you don't really ever bang your head. If it's too shallow, you'll bang the bottom of the board and mess up your board. So
that's why you want
need at
5
least
feet.
5 feet deep. Yeah.
Okay, so everybody out there, if you have a river and you know what he's talking about, fast glass 5 feet deep, you're good to go. All you need is the rest of the setup, right?
Correct.
And some training, I would expect. What are some tips for learning how to do this?
We do have a Riverboarding 101 video on YouTube too. One of the things, it just takes a while. I would suggest you go watch the video. Like I said, one of the things that's hard for people to learn is the proper technique to stand on the board to get it under the water. When people get out there, you have to have your legs straight. If the board isn't fully under the water when you're doing this, when you're doing the stretching movement, then you're not doing the proper technique. Because people get out there and they'll be on their knees trying to stretch the board, and then the nose of the board's up out of the water, and the board just isn't in the water far enough to act like a sail against that current to get them downstream far enough. So you have to make sure your legs are straight, make sure that whole board's under the water. And then, like I said, when you're stretched back far enough, you bend your knees, which brings the nose of the board up out of the surface of the water. And then at that point, you bring whichever foot you are. I bring my left foot forward and put it towards the nose of the board and leave my right foot behind and just get in that surfer stance and get low too. Another thing that people have problems with is when the bungee contracts, it starts out a little bit slow. So a lot of times people stand straight up and then that board takes off on them and they fall off the back end.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, stay low because you're going to start going fast soon.
Okay, as the bungee pulls you, so you're getting pulled against the current. So as far as the water's concerned, it must feel like you're going 1,000 miles an hour, but you're not really going that fast, I'm sure. But what does it feel like to get accelerated like that?
It's a adrenaline rush. It's a pure adrenaline rush when that happens. And I love it when kids, sometimes we'll put a video camera on the board and we'll get the reaction of kids, and they're a little scared at first. They start going, you see a smile break out on their face.
Nice.
Another thing you need to learn too is the hooking part. You have to be a good hooker to be a riverboarder too.
Okay.
Because when your ride's done and you float back downstream, that's another thing you have to look is how to grab that handle and hook it onto that nose of the board so that you can go right again. Because if you don't do that, then you get pushed downstream and you have to walk back up and jump back in and do it again. But if you can hit that hook every time, then you can just do ride after ride after ride. So that's another thing that you have to learn is the proper way to grab that release system and hook it back up to the board as you're floating back downstream. And that often takes people a while to learn too.
So how does that release system work? I'm envisioning something where, okay, the slack is now there and maybe the angle of the rope is different, but I don't understand why it releases.
Because there's just a little bit it's a 6 foot long piece of rope that's encased in plastic.
Okay.
And then at the end of that, there's a metal handle, and that metal handle is what you grab. And then at the end of that metal handle is a loop that sticks out of that metal handle. And so that loop is what hooks on to that hook that we have built into the bottom of these boards.
Okay.
So you have to grab that handle on the end of that rope, and then you'll look at the loop, and then after a while you just know where that hook is on the bottom of the board, and then you reach under there with your hand and hook the loop onto that little metal hook. And then once you do that, that's when you can start pushing that board down into the river current and start your stretch back.
Gotcha. That's a good visualization. So when you get to the point that there's slack and the current's pushing your whole mechanism downstream and you're still going upstream, then you're just going to slide right off of that loop.
When the bungee's pulling you upstream, at a certain point, that bungee's just done pulling and it has no power left. So it just basically stops.
Right.
At that point, you're doing about 30 miles an hour on that board. So the board, since it was just hooked on there, it just comes unhooked. And then the guys keep on going upstream. And like I said, once it's unhooked, that's when those guys can, the good guys, the skateboarder dudes can throw that board around with their feet, or you can put a hand down in the water and you start spinning around. And, that's when you do all the tricks is once that board's released and you're flying upstream.
That is fun. Okay, what do you call the tricks? Describe some tricks for us. I know you guys have some lingo for that.
One of my favorite tricks is something I call a super soaker. So when we have a bungee sniffer coming down the river, I can time it just right so that I can come flying upstream and I'm coming at the bungee sniffer and I turn my board sideways at them. And then I grab the front rail, and when you grab that front rail going that fast, it throws a huge spray of water. And so I can soak a 6-man raft with a huge spray of water when there's bungee sniffers coming down. Generally, I tell people, if there's a bungee sniffer in your way, don't launch. But I'm good enough at it that I can time it just right, and I can come flying upstream and throw a big spray of water, a big rooster tail spray of water on them. So. Sometimes
okay.
I can do a 360. I can put my hand down, which makes the board spin, and I can do a 360 and then grab that front rail, and then throw some water on them.
So you're in Boise, so I'm sure there are commercial rafting companies around there. Do the rafting guides know what you're up to, and they kind of toy with this? Have you ever gone through all the hassles of getting on the plane, security, luggage, long waits at the airport, all that kind of stuff, and then when you finally arrive at your destination, Not only are you worn out, but you also might feel a little bit disconnected. I know that I do when I hopscotch around the planet on a plane. That's one of the reasons why I love the great American road trips, where you get to drive from one place to another and connect all of those dots. You get to experience the changes in the terrain and the weather and the people and the communities. This is one reason that I am excited to present to you our new sponsor, Outdoorsy. Outdoorsy offers a different way to travel. With Outdoorsy, you can rent an RV or a camper and turn the drive into part of the vacation on your schedule with your people and with way more flexibility. Listen, most trips focus on getting somewhere. Outdoorsy is about the part in between. With Outdoorsy, you can rent an RV or a camper and travel on your own terms. No TSA lines, no strict schedules, no rushing through airports. And for extra convenience, Outdoorsy even offers RV delivery and setup in many locations, so you can enjoy the experience without having to worry about the logistics. Outdoorsy connects travelers with trusted RV owners across the country, making it easy to find a rig that fits your style and budget, and I might add, that also fits with the people and the pets that you want to take with you. So when you're ready for a trip that actually feels like a break, head to Outdoorsy.com. Outdoorsy is currently running a special promotion for listeners. Use the promo code ASP at checkout to take advantage of this limited time offer. That's Outdoorsy.com, promo code ASP.
We actually had a rafting company who was going to offer lessons, because that's one of the things I'd love to do too, is get these whitewater rafting companies to do lessons.
Yeah.
And also the whitewater rafting companies too, sometimes they do multi-day trips, on the rafting trips. And it'd be a great activity when you're done for a rafting trip at the end of the day.
Sure.
Set one of these things up in the water and let the clients, have fun. Last year, I sent out over 30 emails to local nonprofits because, as I said, kids love this sport.
Yeah.
So we'd love to take, the marginalized and disadvantaged youth out and have them try this, in a safe condition, safe environment. And I didn't get a single response back from any of the nonprofits in our area. So this year I was preparing to do that again, to send out those emails again. And my wife said, well, why don't we form our own nonprofit and just do this ourselves? So our nonprofit is called Upstream Youth. And we hope to work with, disadvantaged and marginalized youth here in the Valley and take them out and show them what a good time it is.
Upstream Youth.
Yes.
You have a website for that?
Yes, upstreamyouth.org.
That's beautiful. Upstreamyouth.org. So what's so fun about this is that a lot of kids, they may not have an opportunity to try fun things like this, but a lot of kids are just bored. They're just bored. They need a way to interact with adults and with each other, and just to go out and experience nature in some way, maybe to settle their fears of water even. Find a water sport that helps them to enjoy what water can do. And I can see huge benefits. Yeah.
We don't just teach them to riverboard either. We'll teach them water safety basics and, how to swim in the water in a river and how to float downstream. And we'll do all that too. Because one of the things that I like to do with kids is I don't even put them out on a riverboard the first time. This place called Parnell Beach, where we take kids, the first few times I'll just jump in the river with them and show them, okay, if you fall off the board, this is what you do. You swim out at this spot right here. As I said before, we've had kids as young as 4 who do this with us at a place called Parnell Beach. And the kind of place that you need to look for young kids and beginners is a spot that has really slow moving water right after the fast water. And Parnell Beach is exactly like that. Right after the fast moving water, there's a place where the river just opens up and it's really smooth or really calm water after that. So, and then with the kids too, with the young kids, what we do is we'll have somebody stand upstream to catch them and help them with the board when their ride's done. And then we get somebody on the board with them, behind them. And with the kids, we don't stretch them back as far as we do when we're riding solo.
Right, yeah.
And we'll stretch them back just a little ways, and then we'll let them go. and then they go upstream, and then that person's up there waiting for them in case they, can't handle the board or whatever.
Oh, fun.
And we usually have another person downstream too, just as a safety precaution, and we make the kids wear life jackets and all that. So
that's so cool. So safety equipment was actually going to be my next question. I mean, life jackets kind of go without saying, I would think, but what other things? Wetsuits, helmets, what do you need?
Yeah. Here in Idaho, of course, you need wetsuits. The water's pretty cold until about July. So, yeah, we wear wetsuits, life jackets, and helmets. Of course, the guys that are good at it and the skateboarder guys, they usually end up abandoning the life jackets and the helmets at some point. But, yeah, kids and beginners, we definitely make them wear the life jackets and helmets.
And I like the idea of having a spotter downstream.
Yeah.
That's a very good idea. I mean, I can't hardly imagine someone getting hurt seriously doing this, but I can imagine someone getting disoriented or scared and just not knowing what to do.
Or sometimes people just get worn out. We'll have beginners go out there and they struggle with the board because once you know the technique on how to stand on the board and get it to stretch right, it's really not hard at all. But when you're trying to learn how to do that, it takes a lot of muscle to try to learn how to do that. So
I imagine it's analogous to like learning how to snow ski. You start by doing your snowplow pizza, type thing to learn how to control the skis. That's exhausting. That is so much work. But as soon as you learn how to parallel and just enjoy yourself going down the mountain, then it gets so much easier.
Yeah. One of the things too is the sport is actually illegal on the river where I grew up doing it, on the Boise River.
No way.
Yeah. And the reason it's illegal, people ask me, well, why is it illegal? And it's illegal because it evolved from the old school sport that I described.
Yeah.
And that sport is actually kind of dangerous when you have that board tied to the rope because
Whoa.
the board will get turned upside down and it'll trap a kid, on the bottom of the river. Or they also, that old school style, you have rope that's attached to the board.
Yeah.
You need a handle to hold on to as you lean side to side. So they have these ropes that are attached to the board and kids will get tangled in that rope. So that's a problem we face is people still think we're doing that old school style.
Right.
That old school style is dangerous. And another problem too with that old school style is when you were coming upstream, sometimes the rope would get piled up on your board and it could trap your legs that way too.
Sure.
But that doesn't happen because the sport has evolved so much that it's absolutely nothing like that old school style. So it's really the old school style that's illegal, and they haven't witnessed this new school style, so they still hold that old school style against us.
Well, some sort of a distinction needs to be made, right?
Yeah.
So
Well, I'm
that
old
people
enough to remember
understand.
too. I remember when snowboarding was illegal at a lot of ski resorts. Because again, the skiers, those snowboarders are crazy and dangerous, and they can't control those boards. They're going to run over somebody and kill them,
Right.
So it wasn't until 2007 that the last ski resort actually legalized snowboarding, and now snowboarding's legal at all ski resorts. And I don't know if you remember this too, but there was bumper stickers back in the 80s that used to say skateboarding is not a crime.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Because skateboarding too, when it was new and it came along, people were wary of it. People are always wary of new sports, and especially ones they don't understand. So they immediately become fearful of it when they're wary of new things. We sell Riverboarding is not a crime, bumper stickers and T-shirts and hoodies on our website. So
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I've actually put a lot of thought into this, and I don't want to do a deep dive, but Robert, you might find it interesting. They're different personality types. And, you can choose different aspects of personalities and use them to kind of build some sort of a schemata to understand why people do what they do or that sort of thing. And I find a lot of this stuff isn't so much about understanding yourself or figuring something major out. It's about learning to have some empathy for other people.
yeah, that's very true. We often get two reactions, kind of like what you described. We'll get two reactions from people. We'll show the video or I'll describe it to people, and they'll be like, "Oh man, I want to do that. I want to go out.
Yeah.
When can I go do that?" And then you'll have other people that say, "Oh, that sounds dangerous. Is it dangerous?" And I'll say, "Well, come out and watch us and watch the little kids ride, and you'll see that it's not really dangerous." So,
Well, one of the personality tests, the acronym spells OCEAN, or other people call it the Big Five personality test. And the N in OCEAN is for neuroticism. and it's a spectrum. It's like, how fearful do I live my life is one way to think about it. Or how erratic are my emotions? That's another way to think about it. And people that are high in neuroticism, it's not a crime either. It's just who they are, right? But when they see things that they're afraid of, sometimes they think no one should be allowed to do that.
Yeah.
Because it scares them to watch even. And I like to point that out because that's fear doesn't lead us to any good places, right? It's important to have enough fear that we don't hurt ourselves. But when some people are hyper-neurotic, I think they need to know that about themselves and realize that not everybody else feels that way, if that makes sense. Of course, I'm kind of the low neuroticism adventurous guy. So for me, it's really hard for me to understand the neuroticism. But once you understand it's how someone's hardwired for whatever reason, it's easier to have the empathy and say, oh, I get it. I know why they feel that way. But I can agree to disagree with that.
Yeah.
We don't need to do a deep dive into that. But in adventure sports, it's pretty common to have someone standing on the sidelines screaming, what are you doing? Get out of there.
Yeah.
You know, one example is I took my young son into a beautiful glade. The powder was so good, and it was an extreme black, but he was a capable skier and knew how to do a self-arrest, and he was perfectly fine. But this lady skied into this little glade where we were and saw us, and she looked at me with panic in her eyes and says, do you know where you are? Do you know what you're doing? And I just thought, of course we do. But that was her being concerned about whether I was being stupid with my son. I get it. I understand why people feel that way, but sometimes we have to give people the benefit of the doubt. I like
Another
the bumper
one of my
sticker.
favorite spots. We talked about favorite spots earlier.
Yeah.
Another one of my favorite spots is a spot up on the Salmon River, and it's a spot called Wiener Hole. And I'll tell you the reason it's called Wiener Hole is because I had a friend who had some buddies who were raft guides, and he said, come up to the Salmon River and we'll show these raft guides what's up with this.
Yeah.
And so we went the day before, and we were looking for spots to ride on the Salmon River. And when you're in the Salmon River, the mountains go straight up from the edges of the river.
Yeah.
So any place you're on that river, it feels like you're in a hole. So that's why I got the name Hole for that spot.
Right.
But as we found this spot and we set up, and I had forgotten some board shorts. It's about a 3-hour drive up to this spot, up to Riggins, Idaho. And I had forgotten my board shorts on the way up there. So I stopped into town and I got a pair of reversible cotton board shorts at a local store in a small town. And so I'm out there riding. And this is one of those spots where there's just raft after raft of tourists coming down the river.
Okay.
And they all cheer and taking pictures and all that stuff as I'm shooting upstream, ride after ride after ride. And I get done riding over at the riverbank, and I sit down on a rock, and I notice, something doesn't feel right.
Oh, no.
I stand up, I look down, and when I stand up and look down, everything looks fine. But then I get down in the surfer stance, and sure enough, those board shorts, I had totally ripped the crotch out of those board shorts. And so every time I was riding upstream, I was flashing every raft that came by, so without knowing it. So that's why that spot on the. And we also have an app. We have an app on our website that's called the Glass Finder, and it's a spot where you can find riverboarding locations, because that's so people don't have to go explore rivers. We have this Glass Finder on our website at evensurf.com that allows people to go and find places that have already been established as places to ride. So you can find Wiener Hole on our Glass Finder on the website. So, and that's a cool thing about this sport too that relates to ocean surfing. If you're an ocean surfer and you find a spot to ride, you get to name it. And they have lots of different names for those. So if you go on the Glass Finder at evensurf.com, you can find the names of places and places that are already good to ride. So, and then if you find one on your river, we suggest that you put that, because you can add spots on that app too. So
very cool. Yeah, that's fun. It's all good, man. It's about growing a sport, people finding something they love to do, so they'll get out there and experience it and be healthy and enjoy nature. When you tie off, you mentioned you could tie off to a tree or something, but I'm also thinking in terms of, well, you don't want to get slung into the riverbank, right? Yeah. And if the angle is too extreme, I imagine it's going to make it harder to stretch your bungee out, right?
Yeah.
So can you describe what to look for a tie-off?
Yeah. Usually, we even tie onto the shore sometimes onto trees, but it has to be fairly close to the river. But there again, we have about 50 feet of rope before we tie the bungee on.
Okay.
So when you have that amount of rope, you can sit on the board, and this is kind of how it is like old school riverboarding, or old school riverboarding in this aspect, is that when you get on the board at first, you kind of have to lean to your left or lean to your right, depending on which side of the river you're on. You lean the board out a little ways. And we don't ride out in the middle of the river usually either. We're kind of off to the side too, because we want to avoid the traffic that comes down the middle of the river in some places.
Yeah.
Some places there is no river traffic coming down the river, so it doesn't matter. But you get on the board and you have to lean out to your left a little bit, so you get in the current and away from the bank. And that's the spot where you can get in the back in the hole stance, where you push that board down in the river and then get your good stretch back.
Okay. So I'm just kind of visualizing it. You can pull yourself out into the river away from the bank is what you're saying. So
yeah,
there's a lot of flexibility.
Like I said, you use that old school style, and you lean when you're on the board and you're starting your stretch back. You can angle the board to one side, and when you angle to that side, of course, the river current hits it differently, and it can it can move you from one side. You can go left or right as you angle the board. Then when you hit that current, because the current doesn't move real fast along the side of the river either. So you have to angle out to where the current is so that you can push that board down, and then the river current hits it and pushes the board and rider downstream.
Forget what they call it, but they do that with canoes. When you're going upstream and you get to a section that you can't paddle up, then you can put a line on the bow and a line on the stern and stand on the shore, and by changing the length of the line, you can get that canoe to go out into the current, and you can steer the canoe from the shore by doing the same thing. It's like what your lean is.
Yeah.
And so people walk canoes up and through rapids and things like that. They can actually steer them by changing the way that the lines are directing it. Interesting. This is all new to me, and it just sounds so fantastic. You make me want to find a place to do this. And there are places right here, I'm in Gunnison, Colorado. We have the Gunnison River. It's usually fairly shallow, but we have sections where this would be great. Where?
I've done it on that river, on the Gunnison River. There's a kayak park somewhere.
Yeah. Just down below town.
Yeah, and we did it, I think, like at the beginning of that kayak park. So
nice. There's a good current at the top of that kayak park that might be just right.
And that's where we did it. We also did this one time on the Colorado River in Glenwood Springs, Colorado. We were, for a while, we were traveling around the West selling this to outdoor shops, trying to sell the system so that they would stock them and try to sell them. And we had a demo to do for a outdoor shop in Glenwood Springs. And we woke up that morning to do the demo, and it was snowing. This was the end of May. I think it was Memorial Day weekend. And we woke up and it was snowing. And we got out to the river and we're like, well, we have to do a demo. So I got out there. We set it up on the Colorado River there. And I got out there and we had a session in the snow. It was really cool riding upstream and having the snowflakes hit you in the face as you're shooting upstream. So that was a memorable ride too. So, you mentioned kayak courses too. One of our goals, I would love for this to one day be an Olympic sport.
Oh yeah.
Because they already have kayak courses in the Olympics. And there's always water in those kayak courses that we can use to do this. So I imagine that they judge it kind of like a surfing competition. You'd go out for a set amount of time and you have judges who score the number of rides you can do and the tricks you do on that ride. And so that'd be one of the things that would be my ultimate dream, would be to have this actually be an Olympic sport. So, but right now nobody knows about it. We got to get people to know about it first. We've actually had the first contest too. We had our first riverboarding contest. Bungee riverboarding contest they had a thing called the Pay It River Experience, which was a whitewater river festival that they had in a town called Garden Valley here in Idaho. And I called them up and said, we're a river sport. In fact, we're the only sport at that time. We're the only sport invented in Idaho. So would you include us as one of the events in the Pay It River Experience? And they said, sure, come on up. So as one of the events they had, we had a riverboarding contest. And there was a local skateboarder here, Mike Bloomquist, that won that contest. So Olympics are next.
I love it. You know what's funny about this, Robert? And this is a little off topic, but I want to get your perspective on this. People forget where they are. They forget what resources they have locally, where they could do amazing sports, maybe they just never thought of it. The idea of doing this bungee riverboarding in Gunnison, who's ever thought of that, right? But here you say, no, I've done it. I've done it there. When people begin to be imaginative and creative and come up with a new way to enjoy their local area, man, it opens so many doors. And I think it's so important because people think, I'll never learn to ski because I have to travel too far and it costs too much and the barrier to entry is too high and all that kind of stuff. But then it's like, well, do you have a river in your town?
Rivers are everywhere. I have a map. One of my favorite things is I have a map of the navigable rivers of the United States. And if you look at that, rivers are everywhere. The only place there aren't rivers is like part of Southern California and part of New Mexico. So, I mean, everywhere else. And it's the same if I showed you a map of Europe or of Asia, rivers are just everywhere. We've had several business analysts come out and look at the sport too. And one of the things that they tell us is you need to have a star come out. We need Justin Bieber, Zac Efron,
right.
Rock, somebody like that to come out and do it. And the sport would just take off, But then I recently had a meeting with another business analyst, and he said, well, that would maybe just be another 24-hour news cycle. Like when we made the front page of the Wall Street Journal, and I thought, it's going to blow up. We were in the New York Times, and we won the award for Best New Sporting Goods Product of the Year at the world's largest sporting goods trade show also. And each time that happened, I thought, this is what's going to set us off. This is where it's going to explode. But it was really just kind of a 24-hour news cycle in all those occasions. And what this guy said most recently, he said, what you really need is a movement. You need people who believe in this and people who will join the movement, basically, and help you move this sport forward, promote this sport. So that's why I encourage people these days to join our social media. We're on all the channels, and to go to evensurf.com, and you can log in. And when you log in, we'll send you a monthly newsletter on how you can help join the movement.
That's cool. So Gunnison has once a year in the summer, they have River Days. And it's just a weekend that's devoted to celebrating the fact that we have a river that people do. People surf in that kayak park. And when I say surf, I mean on surfboards, right? People, of course, kayak. But the main traffic on this river is people floating it in rafts because they love to fish. And it's just scenic and beautiful. I like to snorkel it, river snorkeling, Mm-hmm. But the point is, if you go to a river festival where towns are celebrating the fact that they have water sports on a river, that would be a perfect time because crowds have gathered, right?
Yeah.
People could see you doing it.
Yeah. We need to get involved in more of those. Boise also has a whitewater park that they put in the early 2000s. And when they first announced that whitewater park in Boise, we immediately went to them and we said, well, we're the only sport invented in Idaho. We're a river sport. Will you include us in the plans for this whitewater park? And they told us, well, the plans for phase 1 have already been cemented, so we can't include you in that, but we'll include you in phase 2 of the whitewater park plans. And then phase 2 came out, and they didn't include us. In fact, they put a sign up that says no bungee riverboarding allowed in the whitewater park. Yeah. So then I called them up and I said, I thought you were going to include us in the phase 2 of the whitewater park. And their answer basically was, well, raise your own money and build your own whitewater park. So that's one of the things that through the sale of our brand, our Even Surf Company brand, and all the other stuff that we do, I hope that someday we can raise enough money to build our own whitewater park here in Boise for riverboarding. I know a couple of great locations in town that we could do it at, so someday we'll get that done.
Well, Robert, sometimes it's a matter of educating people on the value of something. When it catches on and people want to do it and it starts bringing people to your town or whatever, then it's like, there's an economic reason for us to encourage this. Something else, another couple of dots to try to connect. They are building kayak parks in cities without rivers now, where they pump the water, and it's a totally artificial kayak park, just so people can learn to kayak and enjoy kayaking. But they could accommodate what you're doing in those designs as well. A pay-to-play version, in a city without a river.
Yeah, that's interesting because I thought about that because, as I mentioned, the rivers are everywhere. Yeah. But they do crazy stuff in places like Dubai now. In Dubai, they have the indoor skiing places where you can go skiing indoors in Dubai. And we were talking about that one time. That's something I said to somebody. I said, well, you could build a canal in Dubai and you could pump the water, set the canal at the right angle and pump the water up at the top, and you'd have perfect perfect fast glass, and then people could come do this riverboarding there in Dubai. And I didn't know they were already doing that in towns without rivers. So
Yep, they are doing
maybe
that.
someday they'll include us in this also.
Well, and water parks all across the United States where people go down water slides and that kind of thing. They're now putting wave pools and surf pools into those places.
Yeah.
Why not a bungee riverboarding section?
I've tried to work with the Idaho Tourism Councils and all the people that promote tourism in Idaho, because when people think of surfing, they think of California or they think of Hawaii, right?
Right.
Well, when this sport takes off and it gets big, I'd love for people to think, oh, well, where's the best place to do this? Well, it's Idaho. So for years, I've tried to work with the tourism councils and the tourism boards. We have a place called Visit Idaho, and I used to hassle them all the time on Twitter. And they'd be out at some event, an expo in Arkansas or somewhere, and I'd say, well, are you telling them about bungee riverboarding? And they'd be like, what are you talking about? And eventually, they blocked me. So, yeah.
Well, Robert, you're going to get there. You have the passion for it, and it sounds like such a fun sport. Okay, let's talk about benefits of the sport for a little bit. How is it benefiting you? How does it benefit others?
It benefits me. The thing that I love most about this sport is introducing it to these young kids. Like I said before, we have kids that actually get mad at me down at the river sometimes because they'll discover it and I'll tell them that we've been doing it for 20 years. And they're like, oh, why don't I know more about this? Why haven't I heard about this? And so it's just that thing of taking kids down to the river and letting them have a good time and seeing the joy on their faces and then seeing the passion that they get from doing this. Because it's that thing too where once you learn how to stand, which takes a while, and people become obsessed. They'll be like, oh, this time out, I'm going to stand like you guys do, and I'm going to learn how to ride. And then once they learn how to stand, then they're like, oh, I'm going to learn how to do that shove it. I'm going to learn how to do a massive ollie so that I can start doing other tricks off the ollie. So there's always that next thing to learn. So for me, that's one of the things that brings me the most joy is when people discover it and letting people discover it and showing it to people. And on their level too, it's just that joy that it brings them. And I love that too, because hopefully that brings them more time in nature. It's letting them discover something that hopefully will get them out in nature more often. So that's the thing that's my passion.
Man, I'm all over that. What about athleticism? How strong do you need to be to try this?
Well, that brings up another point. We have two forms of this. We have the form where you can hook the board to the bungee, and then we have another form where you can put a handle on the end of the bungee, and that takes a lot of strength, because in the handle riding form, you have to hold onto the handle with your hands, of course, and then you just place the board on your feet, and then you get out in the river current, and the board pushes you downstream as you're holding onto the handle.
Ooh.
And that actually takes, and then once you get back to that spot, you just kind of rotate the board around while you're holding onto the handle, and it shoots you upstream. But you have to be a little bit strong to do that version of it. Whereas the version where you hook the board on, like I said, we have young kids that get out there and do that because the board is, doing most of the heavy work there if it's just hooked on. But still, you have to be somewhat athletic to do it. A lot of people have a hard time at the beginning too, because when you're trying to master that technique, you have to use a lot of muscle to get the board in the right position so that you're going to get stretched back far enough.
Yeah.
But then, like I said, once you learn that technique, it's like snowboarding. Once you learn the technique, you're just standing on the board. Whereas beginners often, they're crouched over and they use a lot of muscle when they're beginning snowboarding. But with riverboarding, once you learn that technique, that's the time that I'm just standing on that board and I'm checking out the nature around me and just looking at the scenery as the board stretches back. So the hook and ride technique doesn't require a lot of muscle. But then again, you do have to have some athletic ability and some balance in order to stay on the board as you ride upstream. So,
are there other sports that kind of cross over? Like if you're a great skateboarder, you've mentioned that.
Skimboarders and surfboarders, usually when they come out, they're pretty good at it. We don't ride with a fin in the tail of the board either. So skimboarders are used to that. Surfers aren't. So when the board goes upstream, oftentimes it gets sideways and stuff on you if you don't know what you're doing. And a lot of surfers and board sports people don't like that, and that'll cause them to crash. But skimboarders are used to not riding with a fin. And that's one of the things we do for beginners too. For beginners, sometimes we'll put a fin on the board, and then the board goes straight going upstream. But once you learn how to ride, that kind of takes the fun out of it when you have that fin on the board. So.
So you have training wheels for it. That's what you're saying.
Basically, yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. What about people who might say, maybe I'll never stand, but I would like to play around on that board and just, belly up the river? Do you have people
Even
that are
that.
like, yeah,
Yeah, even that's a lot of fun. We've had people that have come out with us for years, and they're still just barely learning to stand, but still they love to get out there and just go upstream on their knees. And even going upstream on your knees, you can reach your hand out and then you start doing spins, and it's just such an adrenaline rush, that speed going upstream that close to the river. So, yeah, we've had people that, like I said, that have come out for years, and they're still learning to stand and ride. So,
nice. What about the ability to swim well? Is this one of those sports where you don't have to be a great swimmer, or you really should be a good swimmer?
You have to know how to swim. Let's put it that way. You have to know how to swim at least. And I recommend that you be a good swimmer. But it depends on the situation too. Like when we work with the underprivileged kids, we'll have a lot of safety personnel in the river with us to help these kids. And they also wear a life jacket too. So you don't have to be a great swimmer, in certain circumstances, but you definitely you should know how to swim.
Be comfortable in the water.
Yeah.
I interviewed a lady just recently. Her episode's going to be coming out soon. A beautiful episode. One of my favorite things was she's just a total world-class scuba diver. She learned to swim after she learned to scuba dive.
That's amazing.
It amazed me, but when she was actually learning to scuba dive, her instructor says, "Wait a minute, you don't know how to swim?" And she goes, "No, I don't." He says, "All right, let's teach you how to swim while you're doing this." And so she was scuba diving before she knew how to swim. And I can see sometimes you want to be safe about it, but I can see some water sports that can be the motivation to learn how to swim.
Yeah, I can see that too, where people see this and we recommend that you be a swimmer. So
yeah, they're going to be standing on the bank saying, "Okay, I'm going to go learn how to swim because I want to try that."
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure surfing has done that for a lot of people. Can you imagine being on the beach, not knowing how to swim, and watching people surf, having so much fun? And it's like, oh, okay, I'm going to learn how to swim.
Another thing people often ask me about is commercial tie-ins, because this sport is so new. They ask me, well, this stops people in their tracks, and you see a lot of kayaking and the stand-up paddleboarding and all those kinds of things on commercials all the time. So, we think this would be a great thing for companies to pick up to showcase in their commercials, because it does. People see this video and it stops them in their tracks because they need to figure out how it's happening. Mountain Dew actually showcased the old form of this.
Oh, really?
The old rope and plywood in an ad back in the 70s or 80s. Yeah. Like I said, how you could pop up out of the water a little bit on those old school plywood boards. Well, a guy had a board that was painted like a Mountain Dew can. And they had that in a commercial or an ad back in the day for Mountain Dew. And so I've been trying to get Mountain Dew because, that's the old school version of this sport. And they had the Mountain Dew can. Now here's the new school version. And Mountain Dew actually has a product called Throwback. So there's kind of a tie in there between the Throwback and the old school ad that they had, and now this new school version of it and the Throwback product that they have. So I see a tie in there for Mountain Dew. So
they could show a clip of the old, just a short clip of the old, and then a clip of what you guys are doing, a longer clip, and talk about how Mountain Dew's been there through the years and look what a difference they've made. And, they've had that theme of going out on the rivers and kind of having the real people fun is what I'm going to call it. They
also featured like we talked about the standing wave surfing on a Mountain Dew commercial back in the day too.
Yeah.
They had the guys out on surfboards at a place called Lunch Counter in Jackson Hole, and they did some video in one of their commercials of the guys on the surfboards riding the standing wave.
Okay, well, Mountain Dew people, I know you're out there. I know you're hearing this. This is the podcast for you. Matter of fact, we should be advertising for Mountain Dew on the podcast. But anyway, the point is contact Robert Geier and say, yes, we want to do that, because that would be so cool. So cool.
That would be that's fun. Why we need a movement. There's so many projects like that I have that it's just me trying to do stuff, And if we get people to sign up on the website and join the movement, as we call it, then hopefully we'll have more than just me, Because another thing we'd like to do is I can see there's lots of people who do these travel vlogs. And there's so many countries that I want to visit that have rivers, and I want to do this on Japan. Japan and New Zealand are two of the countries that I would love to visit. So I often reach out to their tourism councils also, and I say, help us bring this sport, and we'll promote your country, and then we'll bring a new industry, hopefully, to your country also through this. So, I've sent letters to all over the place, to Japan, New Zealand, Slovenia, Italy. So we could do this in Italy, and we can promote the country and bring a new industry to this country too. So
something that I've recently learned, which is super cool, is that Europe in general is very, very enthusiastic about some of the more off the beaten track type sports, new up and coming sports. And it's really big in Europe right now.
Europe is one of my dream destinations. And one of the reasons I love Europe is because man was in Europe before there were ecological, environmental groups in Europe.
Yeah.
So in a lot of the cities, men straightened out the rivers in a lot of these cities. So there's tons and tons of what we call fast glass in a lot of these European cities. There's lots of rivers that have been somewhat straightened out. And so the river moves fast, and it has a smooth surface. Again, one of my dream destinations in Europe is a place called the Eisbach River, and it's in Munich, Germany. And that's a place where they do the standing wave surfing too. They have a lot of guys there's a special feature that they built on the Eisbach River, and the guys do the standing wave surfing. But just upstream from that, in a place called the English Garden, there are some guys that do a form of the old school riverboarding, but they use actual bungee cord. So they get a shot upstream, but it's not as big or as far as ours. And then their board is also tied. The rope is tied to their board, so they only go a little ways upstream, whereas we go far upstream. But the water that I've seen them do that on is perfect fast glass. So
nice.
That's one of my dream destinations is to go all over Europe, really, but especially on the Eisbach River there in Germany is one of the places I'd love to visit and do this. So someday.
Very, very cool. Well, Robert, thank you for sharing this with us. I love it when there's a new sport like this, and this one sounds like so much fun. And another thing I want to point out about it is the boards aren't huge. They're fairly portable, easier for travel than a lot of sports.
Very true.
And so I'm thinking about it might be easier to carry this around while you overland than to carry a bicycle. It's kind of on that level.
And we have a bag that the bungee fits in too, so you can carry the board underneath your arm just like a surfboard. And then in the other hand, you carry the bungee that has the bungee and the rope in it. And yeah, I've hiked into lots of places with this. Good
to
gear,
go.
So, yeah, it's not that hard.
Very, very fun. Well, we've burned up our time, but I love it. Thank you for sharing a new sport with us. And people, the name is Robert Geier. The company is evensurf.com. The nonprofit is upstreamyouth.org. And what else, Robert? Where can people find you?
Well, Kurt, if you ever come to Idaho, look me up.
Okay.
Yeah, lots of good places around here. So they can find us on all social media channels, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, we're all there. So, but yeah, like I said, if you're ever in Idaho, and if we're ever in Utah, you said you're in near the Gunnison River?
Well, we're in Colorado part of the Gunnison, yeah.
Okay.
Yep,
if we're ever down there, we'll look you up too, so.
Okay, well, I just happened to be going to Idaho this summer. We'll have to talk.
All right, sounds good.
All right, Robert. Well, thank you again. And for everyone out there, a new sport for you to consider, whatever your sport is, make sure you do get out there and have some fun.
Thank you so much, Kurt.